This episode will be completely taken out of context. Welcome to the Fact Check This podcast.
All right, Fact Check This. And I was going to do this last week, and we got busy. Stuff came up, and yeah, I just didn't end up having time. But a little better schedule this week. A little less going on. Last week, my son had his wisdom teeth cut out. I had court stuff, and my daughter had play practice. Stepdaughter had an orientation for her online school that she's going to. Nephew who's living with us that we're probably going to end up adopting. We were getting him ready for school starting this week. Just too much was going on last week. So I decided to just push this and do it this week. Also, on the topic of this particular episode, I've actually done one very similar. It's been a few years ago. It was episode 149. And it was titled The Intelligence of Intolerance. And it looked at some similar stuff, but these studies and this article and everything have been coming back around, and people have been sharing it, and it's been getting attention again. So I thought it was a good time to sit down and look at it one more time and talk about it a little more in depth. Also, last time that I talked about it, I strictly went off of some of these studies and the actual science behind what it talks about. Whereas this time I tried to find some articles and get more of a, we'll start. The first article that we're going to start with for talking about this is from The Atlantic. So you're going to get all of The Atlantic spin. You're going to get that just like progressive mind virus woke twist to the whole thing. So let's go ahead and jump in, and we'll start with that article from The Atlantic and talking about how intelligence leads to stereotyping. Now, it's funny that they changed the title of this. The original title of the article was "Smart People Are More Likely to Stereotype." And then they, obviously that gives the impression that smart people are stereotypical or are stereotype people. And you don't want that to be so they changed the wording, and they do this a lot. You see it fairly frequently. They'll start something with a particular headline that grabs interest, and then when it grabs the wrong interest, or it says the wrong thing, or in there are many cases where an article, the headline will be objectively false, and what they'll say for the headline, for the title of the article, ends up not being what they say in the article at all. And then they'll end up like making some changes to it. But anyway, how intelligence leads to stereotyping. Upon seeing a young man hoisting a Hitler statue in 2017, most people likely do not think, there goes a Rhodes Scholar. Racists stereotype other people for the most part, but there are also stereotypes about racists. And the stereotype about racists is that, well, they're kind of dumb. But a new study complicates the narrative that only unintelligent people are prejudiced. The paper, published recently in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, suggests smart people are actually more at risk of stereotyping others. The study consisted of a series of experiments, all of which suggested that people who performed better on a test of pattern detection in a measure of cognitive ability were also quicker to form and apply stereotypes. First, researchers from New York University showed 271 participants a series of pictures of red, blue, and yellow cartoon aliens with different facial features, paired with a statement of either a nice behavior, gave another alien a bouquet of flowers, or a rude one, spat in another alien's face. Most of the pairings were random, but two were skewed so that keen observers might pick up on a pattern. 80% of the blue aliens were paired with unfriendly behaviors, and 80% of the yellow aliens were paired with nice ones. The subjects didn't know if the statements about the aliens were true or false. In this way, the study tried to mimic how people actually form prejudices about certain groups, like through anecdotes in the media or through portrayals in TV shows. Later, the subjects were asked to pick which alien had committed a given behavior from a lineup. The participants then took a test called the Raven Advanced Progressive Matrices, a pattern-based exam that's a common measure of human intelligence. For those who are not watching, we have a lineup of 6 aliens, a blue square one, a yellow circle one, a red ovular one, a blue ovular one, another yellow circular one with bigger eyes, and a red square one. And the question is, which one of these punched another alien in the face for no reason? We've seen similar tests and stuff before, haven't we? Those of us who pick up on recognizing patterns. The participants who were better pattern detectors were more likely to make stereotypical errors. They tended to ascribe the friendly behaviors to the wrong yellow alien and the unfriendly behaviors to the wrong blue alien. Meanwhile, they were less likely to ascribe the behavior to a different colored alien. So, going back to which one of these punched another alien in the face for no reason, they might pick the wrong blue one, but they picked a blue one. For the friendly behaviors, they might pick the wrong yellow one, but they picked a yellow one, which indicates that the answer was a blue one. They might have picked the wrong blue one, but they knew it was one of these two motherfuckers, right? A second study showed similar results, but for measures of implicit bias. That is, smaller participants were quicker to stereotype the aliens in the course of a word sorting task, even if they didn't realize they were doing it. Next, the researchers tried it with human faces, showing a new set of participants a series of computer-generated pictures of men with either wide or narrow nose bridges. Here, too, 80% of the narrow nose bridge men were paired with friendly behaviors, while 80% of the wide nose bridge men were supposedly unfriendly. Oh, God. Hey, 80% of them with a wide nose, an unfriendly behavior. All right, test creators. The participants were then partnered with a new set of pictures of men for a trust game using fake money. Again, superior pattern detectors gave more money to the characters with narrow nose bridges, suggesting that they learned the stereotype about friendliness and employed it in judging the new men. These depressing results suggest there's a downside to being smart. Hello, Atlantic spin. Depressing results. Being able to recognize patterns and being smart is a bad thing, according to the Atlantic. It makes you risk reading too much into a situation and drawing inappropriate conclusion. But there's hope. In the second part of the study, the researchers showed that while smart people learn and apply stereotypes more eagerly, they also unlearn those stereotypes quickly in the face of new information. When the smart participants were given new contradictory information about the nosebridge men, for example, they stopped lowballing them in the trust game. The worst pattern detectors, meanwhile, didn't update their thinking in the same way. The same thing happened when the researchers tried to get the participants to unlearn some gender stereotypes. Jeopardy champions and postdoctoral students might reasonably be a little offended by this study. After all, education is one of the best bulwarks against ignorance we have. God, if only that were fucking true. If only education made you not ignorant. God, wouldn't that be... Well, what kind of world would that be? Incredible, right? And the only reason that postdoctoral students might be offended by a study that says that smart people are more prone to stereotyping is because postdoctoral students probably aren't actually that intelligent. Just because you were willing to hang in there and do what was necessary to get a fucking piece of paper in this current bullshit system that we have that's called education doesn't mean that you're fucking smart. That's the problem, is all of these retards with a fucking degree think that piece of paper makes them somebody and means something. That piece of paper right there, that degree, that means jack fucking shit. That's why it hangs in this garage where nobody else ever sees it except for me, and where it's out of focus where you can't even tell what it is, because it doesn't fucking matter. I have it in case anybody ever asked to see it. And my transcript is in there too, and it's not fucking impressive. I graduated with a 2.5 even, and I had to work myself down to that. I was risking like getting a 2.7 or 2.8 going into the end of my senior year, and I had to whittle that bitch down. That's the problem, is these doctoral dipshits think that piece of paper means fucking anything at all. It does not. It doesn't mean a goddamn thing. It definitely doesn't mean that you're smart. Exposure to stories and information that are counter-stereotypical, often the kind of thing that you get from schooling, are one of the best ways to beat back racial bias. Indeed, other studies have found just the opposite, that lower intelligence is linked to greater prejudice. In one 2012 study, for example, Americans who scored lower on a measure of abstract reasoning were also more prejudiced against gay people. According to Jeffrey... Okay, let's address this. So what this says is that stupid people with a low IQ, base their stereotyping and their prejudices on their own ignorance. Whereas intelligent, high IQ, smart people base their biases, base their stereotyping and prejudices on actual factual information and pattern recognition. So, who are the actual prejudiced ones? Who are the actual biased ones? Because if we look at the way that society kind of falls, and we look at the people who do a lot of bias and show an exceptional amount of prejudice, what we see are people like me and others who have been noticing, who talk about certain statistics, who talk about, numbers and facts and figures and historical data and things like that. And then we suggest, hey, some of this shit doesn't look good. Maybe we should be concerned about some of these particular groups and keep an eye on it. And then you have the people that are anti-white people because white people are evil, but don't have anything to back that other than their own belief system. That think that all Republicans are evil, who have nothing to back that with other than their own belief system, who progressives are the real prejudiced, biased bigots. Their prejudices are not based on anything other than their own emotions, which is, as we go back to these articles, what the studies show is that ignorant people base their biases on the fact that they're ignorant, whereas intelligent people base their biases on actual information and are able to, when presented with counter information, be able to adjust those biases to match what the actual situation is. For instance, I can look at all of the studies and all of the research and all of the data that says that, illegal immigrants do all of this crime, that black men in particular do a lot of crime, that other particular demographics are prone to other certain things. And yet I can still be friends with and enjoy the company of people from all of those demographics who prove themselves to be outside of that stereotype. Crazy, right? That we can judge people on an individual basis, but also you go into it with the understanding that The stereotype is real, and it's real for a reason. Fuck, I am a prime example of a lot of white redneck stereotypes being 100% true, and I will never, ever deny it. A lot of times stereotypes are true because they're true. Or stereotypes exist because they're true. Being able to recognize patterns does not make you a bigot. It does not make you biased. It does not make you prejudiced. It makes you intelligent. Stereotyping and prejudice without the data, without understanding that stuff, makes you a bigot, leftist. When researchers ask, what do you think of African Americans, rather than what do you think of this cartoon alien, smarter participants might simply be more careful about what they say. Indeed, Wolke did one study in which white people with better verbal abilities were less likely to be prejudiced against black, more likely to acknowledge racial discrimination, and more likely to support racial equality in principle. But they didn't put their money where their mouths were. Compared to the less verbally skilled white people, the more eloquent whites were less likely to support school busing programs or affirmative action. He also cautioned that, isn't that crazy? He also cautioned that the real world is a lot more complicated than a psychology laboratory. Historical and social contexts play a major role in most types of real-world stereotyping. Wolke provided an example via email. We know that racist stereotypes about blacks having low intelligence and a poor work ethic, for example, did not come about simply from whites observing the behavior of different racial groups, noting a correlation between skin color and the perceived intelligence, and then naively applying these generalizations in novel interactions with blacks. Rather, they emerged because whites colonized and enslaved black populations in pursuit of their economic interests and in an effort to legitimize these actions both to themselves and the subordinated population. They propagated complex ideologies about, among other things, the intellectual inferiority of blacks. That is the most gobbledygook fucking paragraph I've ever read in my life. Holy fucking shit. That has got to be a doctoral student or postdoctorate. Oh my God. Because it's all fucking bullshit, for one. Yeah, that's not what we've observed. Did not come about simply from whites observing the behavior. Okay, maybe those stereotypes didn't come about from the observation of that behavior 400 years ago, but maybe stereotypes are made because they're true. Just throwing it out there. When I asked Jonathan Freeman, a psychology professor at New York University and a co-author of this current study, about these contradictory findings, he said that there might be other factors that predict both high intelligence and less prejudice overall, like socioeconomic status or exposure to diversity. In that 2012 study, for example, individuals who had a greater capacity for abstract reasoning experienced more contact with outgroups, and more contact predicted less prejudice. In other words, being smart might put you at a greater risk of prejudice, but you can still fight against those instincts by challenging your thinking and getting to know people who aren't like you. As Freeman showed, that new information may very well undo the stereotypes you're prone to forming in the first place. They also may reinforce all of those stereotypes and make you even worse, as some people of the last 5 to 10 years have been finding out. Speaking of, isn't that interesting that when we go back to the one study where the intelligent white people who had better verbal skills were, when doing the questioning, less likely to show a prejudice when asking about discrimination and equality, stuff like that. They were less likely to show a prejudice when asked those specific questions, but they still weren't very likely to support school busing programs or affirmative action programs whenever it came down to that kind of stuff. Like, what you're showing is they still understand pattern recognition and they understand a cost-benefit analysis of a situation, but they're smart enough not to get themselves caught up in anything that's going to get them canceled for being racist whenever you're being directly asked about some of that stuff. It's just crazy. So, and I have a couple other articles, and I think I'm going to keep this short and just end it on that today. The other two articles, which I'll include in the show notes for this, and you can click on them and read them. They're a little more based on the science of it, and there's more to those studies than just what was covered in the Atlantic, and they both kind of take that same Atlantic twist of, but you can learn, and that's like the positive takeaway. I think the positive takeaway for the left is that smart people are able to acknowledge and identify and learn from certain pattern recognition. But also that doesn't mean that the patterns aren't real, right? Like, stereotypes exist for a reason. And a lot of times that reason is because they're fucking true. Like, when you look at this stuff, it's hard not to notice. And I think this stuff is starting to come back around now, because over the last few years, there has been a lot of pattern recognition. There has been a lot of noticing. There have been a lot of people who have started to move more to the right, not necessarily because they're intelligent, but because they acknowledge that the left is ignoring all of the things that are actually creating problems for us. In the name of inclusivity and in the name of justice and in the name of, equality and all of that stuff, they are ignoring the patterns that have emerged that show that we should be cautious about certain things. We should be cautious and wary of certain people, of certain groups, that maybe they're not all just a bunch of, refugees fleeing from a terrible situation. Maybe they're actually coming here and they're raping and they're killing and they're murdering and they're, doing a lot of terrible shit. And maybe we should get them the fuck out of here. There are a lot of people who are starting to notice. And as those people are noticing, they're moving more in the rightward direction. And now that's got the left scared. So, but also that's got these articles about intelligence and stereotyping coming back around because people are starting to notice. That'll do it for me today. I actually might do something later this evening. We'll see how my day goes. So I'd say around like 7:30, 8 o'clock this evening, I might try to do something, because there's been a lot of other stuff going on in the news that I would kind of like to take a little time to talk about some of the like current event stuff, because I think a lot of it's funny and I think a lot of it is very telling of the times that we live in. But I really just haven't had time in the mornings to, like, other than like I do the morning show in the mornings on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But other than that, I really haven't had time in the mornings. We've been pretty busy all summer, even though things have kind of settled down and life is getting back to normal, and I have a little more time to do this and be more dedicated to some of this stuff. I'm still super busy and life happens, and I haven't been able to sit down and talk about some of the current event stuff, but there is a lot of interesting current event stuff that I would really like to talk about. So I might sit down and do that later tonight. We'll see. I'll try to put out a notification 15, 20 minutes before it happens if I'm going to, but yeah, that'd be around 7:30, 8 o'clock tonight, probably closer to 8, because my wife we'll hang out whenever she gets home from work. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, look forward to seeing y'all then if I'm able to. And damn it, never mind then. It's off the table. We're not doing it. We're not allowed to do a WNBA stream. So it was going to be WNBA, Sydney Sweeney, dildo throwing, and a few other things that have been going on. So that would only be a part of it, like maybe at most a third of it. But we'll see. We'll see. All right. Anyway, that'll do it for today. I will catch you all next week, if not tonight. Later.